You know, both Shiah Gatwa and I are incredibly beautiful and talented people, and personally, I think that's the biggest coincidence of them all. Hello, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the latest Doctor Who episode. This one, the 2023 Christmas special, or if you're counting differently, the fourth special of 2023, or the first episode of the new run of Doctor Who starring Shiah Gatwa. Take your pick of whatever, but this episode is called The Church on Ruby Road. I have been very excited about this episode for numerous reasons, not the least of which is that we get Shiah Gatwa. Our first real look at him sans David Tennant in the last special, him on his own, getting to fully encompass the role of the Doctor, but also to a slightly lesser but almost more sentimental extent, the first return of the Christmas special episodes of Doctor Who. For the past few years, we've been getting the New Year's Eve special, or New Year's Day special, I guess technically, for Doctor Who under Chris Chibnall, which, I get the idea to, want to change things up, and actually those episodes were typically the better episodes of Chibnall's run on the show, but I really love the, sentimental, Christmassy episodes of Doctor Who. They were always so much fun. They were, a big part of my childhood growing up, and so to see that return, I don't know, I really, really loved it, and it was just so sweet to be yes, there's a new Doctor Who on Christmas Day that I get excited for. So it was a lot of fun. I'm here visiting some of my partner's family for Christmas, and so it was just one of those nice moments where we got to sneak away and watch a new episode of Doctor Who, and I was just really ecstatic about that. But I will stay spoiler-free up front about this episode, and then we'll get full into spoilers. But the first spoiler-free thing that I have to talk about is Shiah Gatwa himself. He was absolutely magical. One of my big complaints about the last special, The Giggle, was my worry that having David Tennant out there, still being kind of Doctor, even if he was retired, would take away from Ncuti being the Doctor, especially since he is the first, Black Doctor Who, and I don't want to categorize him as just that, but there is sort of that people who want to sort of delegitimize him as the Doctor just for that reason, and so I was a little bit worried about that, but Ncuti just came in to this episode and just owned the role. Every scene that he is on screen, he is just a dominating presence, and not in an overbearing way, but he feels fun and in control, and just has a sense of the character of the Doctor and his version of the Doctor that I still see glimpses of all the Doctors over all the years, and yet he still feels his own. And I think a lot of that just comes out in his just personability and his closeness, and just again, there's this confidence in himself that again, most Doctors, especially in their first episodes, both the actor and the writers and the character are kind of figuring out who they are. I got none of that with Ncuti. He knows who he is right here from the start, and I loved that. The moments that he has where he's just expressing joy at wanting to learn more, trying to explore new things. I loved his also love of meeting new people and their little idiosyncrasies. That felt very Doctor Who, especially Doctor Who under Russell T Davies. It brought me back to the era of the episodes of the very first episode of Russell T Davies' run with Rose, or David Tennant dealing with Rose's family or Donna's family. Just those moments that really felt like quintessential Doctor Who and quintessential Russell T Davies Doctor Who, that I just absolutely adored. And then we also got introduced to Millie Gibson, who is playing Ruby, our new companion for the Doctor going forward. And I have to say, she got a little less time to shine, even though technically she is kind of the guiding force of this episode. And while she is interesting, she is kind of playing a little bit of that audience surrogate that we got in so many episodes, like Rose, for example, being sort of the big one. And Ruby does not have that force of presence just yet that Billie Piper had when she first came onto the scene. Billie Piper's just again, you just got Rose, and I'm getting a little bit less of that with Ruby. I don't dislike her, but she kind of falls more into that Clara feel with me, and I ended up really liking Clara, especially when she was working with Peter Capaldi. But when she first started, she felt a little less like she had a strong personality, especially when we got to the third version of Clara that eventually did run around with Matt Smith's Doctor. So I don't hate Ruby, and I definitely can see elements of stuff in her that I'm really liking, that sort of element of curiosity and wonder and caring about others, but there's less of a hook into her personality and who she is that we see here. And I think that is part of just the fact that there's just a lot going on. Shiah Gatwa sort of taking center stage, the fact that we are dealing with kind of a new dynamic dynamic for Doctor Who that I'll get into in the spoilers, and also just like introducing us to like the world of her character. I think that she just got a little bit lost in all of that. But I am very excited. Like, there's by no means anything that I disliked about her, but I'm curious to get a little bit more into her as the series goes on, because she didn't have that like force of Rose or even Aving Pond, who just came onto the scene and had that like very specific personality that I really wanted to feel. But let me start getting into some of the spoilers here, because there's actually a lot going on that I really want to talk about, that I'm both curious about and have some critiques and thoughts about. But overall, what I will say is I really enjoyed this episode and had a lot of fun with it. It definitely fell into that Christmas sentimental spirit. All right, now that we dealt with all that, let's actually talk about some spoilers, because I have a lot that I want to talk about this episode with, and I'm just like really, really pumped to talk about. So the first thing that I kind of need to talk about is just the first scenes that we get with sort of Ruby going through her life and Shiah Gatwa sort of appearing around her, investigating her. I love this. Again, it very much felt like Rose. I think that this episode is going to be the most compared to that, despite it being a Christmas special episode, because with Rose, with Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, it was very much we got to follow a day in the life of Rose Tyler, and then Christopher Eccleston sort of popped up here and there as he was investigating his own thing that Rose just happened to be tangential to. This has a similar quality in that we get to see Ruby going about her pretty much everyday life, with Shiah Gatwa appearing in the background and her sort of like noticing him while also dealing with her own stuff, with the Goblins sort of messing with her. And I loved by the way, the Goblins like just messing, like moving coffee cups and moving things around. I was like, oh my gosh, that sense of like, oh man, I don't remember putting that there. Like, they just perfectly captured that like that weird element of like, I don't remember putting it there. How did that get over there? I think I left my glasses over here. Just like that idea that they are the ones that cause all that mischief was just a lot of fun. And I enjoyed seeing that sort of being targeted right at Ruby and the people around her that the Goblins were sort of messing with. And getting to see Shiah Gatwa sort of appear in her life was also a lot of fun. It did lead to that one scene that so many of the anti-SJW folks are freaking out about in the trailers, where Shiah Gatwa was sort of dancing in his kilt at a nightclub, and so many people are so angry, like, the Doctor's like dancing in a skirt, man, they're trying to feminize the Doctor, they're ruining the Doctor Who to put in a gayness in it, which number one, I wouldn't have cared, but it was also like, he's just there at the club because Ruby's there. But I'm also here for like I love that he's there investigating her, but he is also just like living his best life, having a bunch of fun. And it kind of goes to like Shooty's performance. Like, he is definitely not shying away from the queerness of the Doctor. And when I say queerness, I don't mean like he's hitting on all the guys around him, but he is just a very like queer-coded character in his vibes and his feel and his like sense of self, and like, I'm not going to take shit from anyone about who I am, but also like his just celebration and joy in life and those around him. It just, Shooty just really just captured that like really beautiful element of the queer community that I really love, that isn't necessarily tied to like sexuality, but just this like vibrancy of self and hope and just love of community that you just got in all of his little pieces throughout all of this, that I absolutely adored. And his just joy at everything was just so much fun. And when he comes in with Ruby and is sort of like, saying, he's gin and tonic inspector or whatever it was, it was just so much fun to just see his reveling in this role. And I adored all of that. Also, we got to learn a little bit about Ruby, and that she's, she's an orphan, or she was abandoned as a child. I guess foundling is the term, but now I'm like, the episode has this whole point about like, oh, is foundling an outdated term? I don't know. Apparently, the Davina McCall show is a real show. I looked that up afterwards, where they look into people who are foundlings. I don't even know. I've never heard that term before, so I'm like, is it an offensive term? I don't know. The episode seemed to think it might have been old-fashioned. I have no idea. But the fact she was abandoned as a kid, and I liked that there was this element of mystery that was brought in with that. It was like, who is her mother? Do we need to care about all of that? And the episode ends, I'll sort of jump ahead of that, where the Doctor does see her mother sort of walking away, and he doesn't go after her. And I like this element of like, is it a bigger mystery that like will tie into the bigger season? Like, is who her mother is going to be like some bigger revelation throughout the season? Or is it just someone that we never get to know? And I like that we don't really know that right now, because it kind of goes to Ruby's mindset. It's this presence in her life that she never got to know, but like feels a bit of an aching for. And so she wants to solve this mystery, but never gets to have the answer. And so, or at least right now. And so this idea of even us as the audience, it puts us into this moment where we're like, is this a bigger mystery or is it not? And we're sort of I'm sure there's gonna be a bunch of people speculating about who her mother is. And it's just gonna be this sort of question in the air of like, is it a bigger deal or is it not? And that kind of puts us in the role of Ruby. And I thought that was, I think that was really, really smart and just wonderful for a a way to sort of build that mystery in there. We then get some Russell T Davies-isms where we sort of get to meet Ruby's family, Cherry, and I like this sort of like different type of family. This mother who like raises a bunch of people, Ruby being the one who stays, it being sort of a very eclectic and strange and different family. We get to meet Cherry Sunday, which I love. Shiah Gatwa sort of hitting on her a little bit in like a fun sort of way. It's like Cherry Sunday, and she's like, and just the joke about the tea, just all a lot of fun. And again, it kind of fits Russell T Davies' writing, where he writes a very different style of family structures. Even going back again to use Rose as a sort of example, it's not the what parent, mother and child relationship. It's like you got, a foster parent, or with like a single mother in Rose's case, like that element of it that I really just liked seeing. I think that's something unique, something different, and it feels, you get the sense of loving that comes out, especially when the goblins do sort of go back to the past and erase Ruby from the mother's timeline, but you still get this like sense of like she still cares about Ruby even though she's been erased, like the crying moment with her. I will say, while I think the mother's crying was really great, as much as I love Shiah Gatwa's performance, it was so clear that like they put like the fake tears on him. When we come back to him, he just has tears running down his face, and I'm like, no way those are real tears. I'm sorry, Shiah, you're a great actor, but someone put those fake tears in your eyes because they needed it for the script. But it was just a really powerful moment in the sense of like emotion still there. Again, it kind of goes into the Russell T Davies-isms that we've seen, like time changes, but emotions still hold. And what I like about that is it ties into sort of this new mandate that seems to be coming in with Russell T Davies now, is the sort of more magical realism element. I don't even want to say magical realism has a little less whimsy when it comes to sort of that, when you use that term, but this idea that like a more magical version of Doctor Who. Because Doctor Who, while it's never been like the most grounded scientific show ever, it was always kind of playing more with scientific language. Like, it was always aliens. It wasn't actually ghosts, it was aliens, or there was like a gas leak or whatever that caused people to believe they were ghosts. Here we're getting actual goblins. And I really love that, like, it kind of comes after the mandate of the giggle, where, David Tennant's Doctor sort of placed the salt at the edge of the universe and sort of lets a little bit of state of play in with the toy maker. And so there's this sense that, like, Doctor Who is sort of shifting into maybe playing with a little bit more of those elements that are falling into magic, and not necessarily needing to explain them as like, oh, these goblins are actually aliens from another planet, that they came to Earth and they have different rules. It's just, no, they're just magical kind of goblins that can just jump through time and, feed off of coincidences and things, which has always kind of been part of Doctor Who, but there's always been an explanation for it. Like, again, the Weeping Angels, they throw you back in time or something like that. And so I thought that was just a nice playing with it, but what it allows us to do is to kind of play with the magicalness of it in a scientific way, because the Doctor just having so much fun kind of learning the language of rope, and that's their sort of wires and electricity. That was just such a unique twist for me that I found just really fun, and seeing that Shiah Gatwa just getting so excited at like having to explore the ropes and like figuring out how to mess with them in his own way. Like, he just gets excited at learning a new thing, something he never really thought he would ever have to explore. And I thought that that's a really cool mission statement for Doctor Who going forward in the next few seasons. It's an interesting shift that I think that it'll be fun to play with. One thing I will say I'm a little bit more tepid on, I've been very ecstatic about this overall, is the goblins themselves. I loved their design, the music, and when they were singing, and also Shiah Gatwa and Millie Gibson singing at that moment was just a lot of fun. It felt very Christmassy, like let's do a little song and dance number. Loved that. What I will say is, I don't know, these goblins aren't the worst. But there is an element of me, especially because of Russell T Davies kind of being very outspoken about trans issues and trans rights, and maybe I'm drawing a few long connections here, but being very outspoken about trans issues and trans rights, and being so vocal against someone like J.K. Rowling, for example, and J.K. Rowling also facing a lot of criticism for her use of goblins in her story, and the anti-Semitism, that coding that she had for those goblins. Again, maybe not overt, like I hate Jewish people that she was doing, but she was definitely pulling from Jewish stereotypes, Jewish coding, Jewish anti-Semitic imagery for her goblins. And so for Russell T Davies to use goblins in this story, and they're doing kind of like, we kidnap babies to eat them and use them in our weird rituals, kind of leans a little bit into that blood libel storyline. It's not as overt as, say, Harry Potter, in the sense that, these goblins are very much like looking like the, Protocols of the Elder of Zion anti-Semitism images. But it is an element that's still there that, like, again, it's not the worst thing in the world. Goblins are a thing of mythology. It's not, like, it doesn't destroy my, love of the episode overall, but it's just one of those things that's like, it just brushes up against that sort of stuff that feels like it should be a conversation that we would be having in a larger sense, especially when we're talking about, like, trans issues and, J.K. Rowling in other areas, that element is a conversation of, I don't know, it felt a little weird to me to do that. And it even felt weirder too, maybe I overread it, but in the lyrics, the song says something like jet black hair orphan boys, like we eat them, and Harry Potter often being described as like with jet black hair in the books. So there was an element of like, is he kind of poking fun at Harry Potter there? And if so, with the goblins, again, it kind of ties into all of that stuff. Not the end of the world. I loved the design of the goblins. I loved the fun of them. I loved the story overall. I love them playing with coincidences. That felt all really great. It was just something that brushed up against that with me that rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. One thing, though, that I really did end up liking quite a lot was the fact that when we came back from the goblin ship, and by the way, the hand grip gloves was also very clever. The whole excursion on the ship was very fun. The pirate ship in the sky was also a lot of fun. But when we got back and we had the doctor sort of talking with Ruby and explaining, that they deal with coincidences, and what the coincidence is that sort of causes the goblins to be able to have power again, was the fact that, both Ruby and the doctor were orphans and didn't know their parents, kind of tying into the Timeless Child Flux stuff from Chris Chibnall's era. I still really love Russell T Davies bringing in elements of Chris Chibnall's era that Chris Chibnall did nothing really with emotionally, and using it to great effect in these stories, like really making, like, not discounting those seasons, but still sort of bring them in for added drama and building with the character. Chris Chibnall, Russell T Davies has done more with the Timeless Child and Flux in just like 3 or 4 episodes than Chris Chibnall did his entire run, which is a little disappointing. What is interesting to me, though, is the fact that, I thought, like, he brought it up once in the second special with David Tennant, but it's come up a few times since then. And so I'm curious if the Flux and the Timeless Child stuff is something that Russell T Davies is going to be interested in exploring going into the future seasons, or if, it's mentioned here was, this episode very much feels like an interesting onboarding point. If you have someone who wants to get into Doctor Who, they heard all the excitement about the David Tennant specials, but didn't want to watch all those, be like, here, watch this episode with Shiah Gatwa, you're off. And so this feels like a way to, like, explain that sort of stuff, and then we sort of ignore it. I'll be curious if it gets a mention again, like the Flux and the Timeless Child stuff gets a mention again in the next few episodes when we get into the actual season proper. If it gets mentioned, then I'm like, maybe he's actually building into doing something more with the Timeless Child. I don't know how I would feel about that, but if it does get mentioned again in like quote unquote normal episode, I would be more being like, maybe he's building somewhere with this. Potentially right now, it still falls into that, like, explaining to the audience the Doctor's backstory rather than like actually planning to do anything with those seeds. But he has mentioned enough that starts making me think that he might do that. So keep an eye out for that. The only other thing that I really need to, I think we need to discuss is the woman at the end, Ruby's next door neighbor, who seems to know a little bit about the TARDIS. And again, this sort of falls into that gray area of this. This is a Christmas special episode, so her sort of like knowing the TARDIS, telling Ruby to go, and looking at the screen and breaking the fourth wall at the end there and saying, what, you've never seen a TARDIS before, is interesting to me, because it could just fall into that, like, it's a Christmas special episode, there's a little wink at the camera, a little bit of fun, a little bit of playfulness that kind of, again, falls into this post-Toy Maker era of Doctor Who. So it could just mean nothing and just be a little fun wink and a nod for Christmas times. Or it could be a much bigger signal that maybe this is going to be an important character. Is she the Ronnie? As all of us always like to say in the Doctor Who families, oh, it's the Ronnie now. So it could be a bigger villain. It could be the Ronnie. It could be something else. So I'm curious to see what's going to go on with her. If she comes back, she'll be a recurring character. Or if that was just a fun wink and a nod. I would probably toss it up to a fun wink and a nod right now, but if she does come back in another episode, like we get like with Russell T Davies likes to do, having an episode where Ruby comes back and visits her family or something like that, if we do get those episodes and she does still appear again, then I might say, oh, maybe she has a larger build. But if we never see her again, obviously, I don't think it was going anywhere. So yeah, well, that's pretty much everything. I'm sure there's a couple things here and there that I forgot to discuss. You know, the small moments of the Doctor with like the policeman and telling him about his wife that he's going to propose to, and the stuff with saving Davina Call, all that jazz. That was fun. That was like, again, Doctor being Doctor. I thought there was very sweet Christmassy moments. The only other thing I would say is maybe the pacing was off in this episode a little bit. Like, there were some scenes that went on a little bit too long when the Doctor's sort of figuring stuff out in Ruby's apartment, things like that. But on the whole, I found this to be a really fun, exciting episode, a great introduction to Shiah Gatwa's Doctor, a decent introduction to Millie Gibson, though I'll hopefully get more warmed up to her as this season goes along. But overall, just a really fun adventure for Shooty's first turn as the Doctor. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. I am currently not in my home. There's also, I don't know if you can see them down there, there's some cute little cats here exploring around and having fun with the different Christmas stuff. So I've been having fun with my friends' cats. But otherwise, I hope you all live long and prosper, my friends.